Hello, everyone. So I'm Alex. I'm a freshman here in the BS/MS Cybersecurity program, and I'm going to be talking about election security. And some disclaimers up here. We're going to be talking about Brazil. The government has specifically said that they have not found any cybersecurity holes within their systems. The paper that I found would suggest otherwise, but they expect everyone to say there have been no confirmed cases of election manipulating there or in the US. I want to make that very clear before we start. A little bit about me. I am new to cybersecurity, but I've worked at a company where I was involved in building the business procedures for cybersecurity. So I have a little bit of experience with how to think about procedures, which I'll be covering a lot today. So I'm going to start off with a very surprising fact. In Brazil, there's 140 million people that all use the same election system. And you need only one person or one bad actor within the chain to immediately invalidate all 140 million of those votes, because there are some glaring holes that have been brought up and the government has failed to fully address them. So we're going to be talking about why do electronic voting at all? How can people attack elections? And what should be done about security with electronic voting? And what can we as people who will be entering the cybersecurity field learn from this experience? So as I said, I'm talking about Brazil. They were one of the first countries to have an electronic election in 1996. 1996 also was the first year that anyone in America had even brought up the idea about electronic voting machines. So they were very early to the game. Now, as of 2018, 100% of their ballots are electronic. There are 0 paper ballots within the entire country, which also brings up some of the cybersecurity concerns. And every single person uses one system. So any vulnerability that you have affects every single federal, state, and municipal election. So why do you have electronic voting at all? Well, sorry, accidentally hit the wrong key. Yeah. Well, it's all because of manipulated elections. 1994 is an infamous year for elections in Brazil. They had, especially in the state of Rio de Janeiro, they had insane levels of corruption. People could decount from one politician and add to another, creating complete election chaos. You had people who were getting dozens of votes in municipal elections who didn't actually get a single vote on paper. And so with that, the TSE, or the Election Superior Court, decided that things needed to change. And they very quickly rolled out an electronic election scheme. And the TSE will be the big player in what we're talking about today, since they run the elections and they run all the laws related to the election. So they're completely separate from the rest of the government. And so Brazil actually has a very strong cybersecurity approach. They have a long process with several audits going throughout, a complex distribution scheme that tries to reduce the people's ability to manipulate elections. They have verification processes done after the elections to make sure that all the data is transported properly. So with that in mind, if they have such good security, how do you hack an election? Well, voters cannot verify their vote. When you put a number into the system, you are having blind trust that the system is accurately recording it. And so the 2017 audit that I researched about, and then a previous 2012 audit, both had all their issues arising from the fact that voters cannot verify that their vote went across properly. So let's say you want to start. You can start off by finding the encryption key that is used to modify the firmware. Well, in Brazil, they made the smart decision of having one encryption key for every single machine, meaning that if you can get that key, you can modify every single machine in the country. Additionally, this key is easily accessible to anyone who works at the TSE, even if they are not directly involved in this development of cybersecurity. So you just need to find one of 1,000 or so employees who is willing to access a file and give it to you, and there would be very little ability to detect that it happened. You can then have these deploy cards. They are encrypted with the universal key. And these are held largely by people at a specific municipality or in some cases specific precinct. You then have your unsigned libraries, your OpenPGP, your OpenSSL, all the unimportant stuff. For those of you who don't know, OpenPGP and OpenSSL are core critical security libraries. And in these machines, both of them were unsigned. And from there, you can attack a whole bunch of other things. There's also, if you can get physical access, you can achieve a lot more from the system. So it's great that a machine that's not supposed to have a keyboard has an extra USB port and an extra USB driver on it. So even though you're never supposed to connect a keyboard, you can just plug one in, and it'll work right away. You can modify the key derivation algorithm. It's surprisingly easy to do. The paper that I looked at was able to modify the key derivation algorithm to use a known key in less than 30 minutes. And this is not caught by most audits because of the way that they did it. You can also modify with the screen and vote. So this is an actual photo from an audit that someone had done. They replaced President 61 with, that has that image and that person with President 99, who is Darth Vader and one of the stormtroopers. And you can do all of this because there's very weak memory protection. There's also an add vote method that is very easy to replace. And it just puts in, that's where the black box is, this add vote method. You have no idea that what you're putting into it actually comes out of it. And so it's very easy to change what that add vote method does. And this all sounds very complicated. I don't want to have to go through a process of trying to get access to all these individual machines and changing the algorithms. Well, if you can find just one corrupt politician or anyone who is not involved in the process, anyone at a municipal level, 50 machines per install disk, with most jurisdictions having 4 or 5 install disks. So that's easily enough to change at a local election. And then you can attack the top. At the top level, there's all of these employees for the TSE, and they have an audit by all the parties in Brazil. But then they don't actually have, once that audit's done, they have a development period that's not audited again. And so that's a very easy place to have someone go in and modify core functions, and no one would be able to detect it. And so there's a whole bunch of things that the TSE can do. Using up-to-date cryptography algorithms, most of their stuff has not been used, or is not safe since the 90s, and some of the stuff even in the 90s was not considered safe for basic cryptographic use. They can follow the standards. They were surprisingly non-compliant, even with Brazil's own standards. But the biggest thing is create a paper trail system, since you aren't able to verify. And so with all of the auditing that they were talking about, you can't actually audit based off of what people entered into the machine, since you have no record of that. And so all of these attacks are based off of the fact that there is not an auditing system. There are 3 ways to approach this, and one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit more is communication. Brazil took the approach of saying that everyone who said that there are risks are conspiracy theorists. This post was posted at less than a year after the audit happened that revealed that someone could change the entire federal election results. The TSE said, we've fixed all those issues, it's not a problem, and they stopped the auditing program, which at the very least, I would say is not transparent. And I know many Brazilian cybersecurity experts have expressed similar frustration with the process. My home county, San Mateo County in Silicon Valley, actually, for the 2020 election, moved away completely from electronic voting. They already had a physical paper system, so they realized that it was easier to audit. And so they just created a digital touchscreen around a physical paper system, which then a person can visually see that all of the data that is being put into the system is actually what they want it to be and not being manipulated after the fact. And it offers voters greater transparency, since you're not entering a number and just hoping that it goes through the way that you intend. So there's also, you can mitigate risk with electronic elections. And I wish that I had a little bit more to say about this. As I was working on my presentation, I started coming up with ideas of how to mitigate risk, but I haven't gotten far enough to be able to communicate a lot of stuff. But there are certainly benefits to electronic elections over a paper election. And if you properly address the risk with a paper election, then electronic can make a lot of sense. So our key takeaways: First, communication and trust. The biggest issue that people within Brazil, people that I talk to who are frustrated with the election system, is that there's lack of transparency. And this is not just an election issue. I have family members who know nothing about cybersecurity, and whenever any of these attacks comes up, the companies are very bad at communicating the ideas. They're very bad at communicating what exactly is going on and how it impacts everyday people. And I think that is one of the biggest areas where the cybersecurity industry can improve, is how do you communicate and assure trust when your entire industry is based off of things going wrong. Secondly, small changes have a big impact. Brazil has a complicated millions upon millions of dollars election system. All they need to do is have a paper trail, and suddenly so many of the concerns that people have are gone. Because once you get the data into the system, it is very secure. And third, taking a process approach to things is a very good idea. It's very easy to get tied up in the idea of just throwing more technology to solve a problem. But you have to ask yourself, will more technology actually solve the problem? In my experience, having more technology often doesn't solve the problem, and a small process change can radically reduce the amount of time that you're spending and the amount of risk that you're having with your cybersecurity processes. So if you make small changes like having an auditing system, then all of this goes away and your system is a lot more secure. So hopefully you can use that when you're developing your own systems.